Every nation on Earth carries a ledger full of promises. The United States now shoulders over $38 trillion, its largest debt ever. The European Union carries around $14 trillion. Japan, nearly $9 trillion. Even oil-rich kingdoms such as Saudi Arabia or export powerhouses like Germany and China, they all owe staggering sums. Yet here's the paradox. If everyone is in debt, who really holds the tab? Debt is not just a burden. It is the very structural framework of the modern world. Every war, every meltdown, every golden boom, every crushing bust, they all rest upon this hidden scaffolding of obligations. Trace the chain of creditors long enough, and you'll uncover something unsettling. The world isn't indebted to a single entity. It's indebted to itself. But that doesn't mean the rewards are shared equally. In order to understand how we ended up here, floating on more than $315 trillion of total global debt, roughly 3 times the size of the entire world economy, we must travel back to the roots. Centuries before the first credit card clicked or a digital transfer blooped, the concept of national debt was born not on Wall Street, but in wartime. In 1694, England was locked in conflict with France and its coffers were running dry. The king turned to merchants. They financed the crown in exchange for a perpetual stream of interest backed by future taxes. To manage this radical innovation, the Bank of England was created. It was groundbreaking. The state could now spend money it didn't yet possess. And in return, lenders received something even more precious. A promise from the government. Something tradable, sellable, negotiable. That was the birth of the government bond, the seed of the modern financial system. France emulated it. The Netherlands refined it. The newly independent United States adopted it to underwrite its revolution and push westward. National debt transformed from a symbol of failure into a badge of credibility. The ability to borrow became the ability to rule. Once empires conquered lands to extract gold, now they issued bonds to claim interest. The battlefield shifted to the balance sheet. Fast forward 3 centuries, and debt has become the planet's dominant export. The US owes $38 trillion, Japan over $9 trillion. And global borrowing grows by about $1 trillion every 100 days. Every state owes, every institution lends. Every individual, via taxes, savings, or pensions, is simultaneously debtor and creditor. But who is on the other side of the ledger? Let's zoom in on the United States. Because its debt isn't merely domestic, it's global. Out of that $38 trillion figure, roughly half is publicly held, meaning owed to external investors rather than government agencies. Of that slice, about 2/3 of the creditors are domestic. American banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, even the Federal Reserve. The remaining 1/3, roughly $9 trillion, resides in foreign hands. Japan is the largest foreign holder with about $1 trillion, followed by China with around $800 billion, then the UK, Luxembourg, Belgium. So when people claim the US is in debt to China, technically yes, but that's only about 2% of the total. The bulk of what America owes, it owes to itself. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Fed often repurchases them, creating fresh dollars in the process. Americans pay taxes to fund the interest on those bonds, interest that flows into American retirement accounts. It's a closed loop, a mirror of the same system. The debt is real, but the creditor is largely a reflection of the system itself. And this circular pattern is not just American, it's global. Japan lends to the US through treasuries. The US lends to Europe via the International Monetary Fund. Europe lends to developing nations via the World Bank. Those developing nations, in turn, lend back to advanced economies by parking foreign exchange reserves and Western bonds. It's a planetary game of hot potato, except the potato is made of promises. Every nation holds someone else's IOU, every promise backed by another promise. Imagine a poker table where every player borrows chips from the next. The only rule keeping the game rolling is nobody stands up. But there's another layer altogether, the deepest one: the markets themselves. Behind every government bond lies a web of institutions: hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, central banks managing tens of trillions in assets. They are the real gatekeepers of credit. They decide which nation borrows cheaply and which pays a premium just to stay afloat. When their confidence falters, currencies collapse, governments fall, entire economies can be rewritten overnight. Democracy chooses who governs. Markets choose who survives. And at the center of this system sits the modern high priest, the central bank. Central banks don't simply manage debt, they manufacture it. Every time the Fed or the European Central Bank buys government bonds, it creates new money in exchange. One balance sheet's liability becomes another's asset. Every dollar in circulation represents a unit of debt somewhere else. There's no such thing as debt-free money. Every coin, every note, every digital dollar carries an invisible IOU. For decades, this loop sustained itself through confidence. So long as investors believe governments will service the interest, even if never the principal, the machine keeps turning. But what happens when that confidence wavers? We've witnessed it before. In Greece in 2010, government debt became unmanageable. Bondholders panicked. Yields soared. The European Central Bank and IMF stepped in, but their rescue came with a price: austerity, tax hikes, spending cuts, mass unemployment. For a generation, bailout meant sacrifice. In Argentina, repeated defaults turned debt into a national curse. In Sri Lanka, fuel shortages and political collapse followed when foreign currency loans couldn't be serviced. When the system breaks, the creditors suddenly become visible. The IMF, rating agencies, anonymous bondholders holding nations by the throat. And yet, even after collapse, the logic restarts. New loans replace old ones. Old debts are restructured. The machine resets with a new label on the same balance sheet. Because in the 21st century, debt isn't meant to get paid off. It's meant to be rolled over. Governments don't actually intend to wipe out their debt. Not now, not ever. This isn't a conspiracy, it's policy. When you or I take a loan, we expect to repay principal. Governments operate differently. They treat debt like a perpetual subscription, issuing fresh bonds to retire old ones, a process economists call refinancing. The real product? Interest. The rent for stability. And the global economy now depends on that rent. Think of it as a shark that must keep swimming to breathe. The system runs on confidence, not repayment. The United States will never clear its $38 trillion debt. It will refinance it indefinitely. Japan has rolled over its debt for decades, its burden now surpassing 250% of GDP, and yet its government bond yields sit near zero. Why? Because investors aren't waiting for repayment. They're waiting to renew the deal. Why renew? Because to them, government debt isn't a liability. It's the safest asset in existence. A U.S. Treasury bond is not seen as an IOU. It's seen as an asset, the foundation of global markets. Pension funds hold it. Banks use it as collateral. Central banks treat it as money. The system depends on governments never paying off their debt, because if they did, the world would lose its most trusted financial instrument. Imagine Washington somehow decided to erase every last dollar of its debt. Banks and funds worldwide would suddenly lose their most stable asset. The dollar supply would shrink drastically, triggering deflation, perhaps collapse. Paying off the debt would destroy the very infrastructure that makes the economy function. So governments do the opposite. They keep issuing more, not chaotically, but rhythmically. Debt becomes the heartbeat of capitalism itself, pulsing through every pension fund, mortgage, and market on Earth. And that SY when politicians speak of balancing the budget or eliminating national debt, they re-selling a mirage. The objective isn't elimination, it's sustainability, serviceability, and desirability enough that the system never loses faith. Because once belief slips, the numbers don't matter. Confidence collapses. Interest rates skyrocket. The economy built on rolling promises suddenly grinds to a stop. That is the real secret of sovereign debt. The plan was never to pay it back. The plan is to keep the world believing it will. It's a closed loop of trust. And as long as trust holds, the numbers can stretch indefinitely. But trust is unevenly distributed. When we say we owe it to ourselves, that's only part of the story. Interest payments don't flow evenly across society. They flow upward, from taxpayers and workers to the institutions and investors that hold the debt. In other words, debt is not merely a transaction between nations. It's a transfer between classes. That's why global inequality and global indebtedness rise together. The system rewards those who hold debt and burdens those who only pay it. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's the same arc from households to nations, from nations to the entire planet. Creditors aren't villains. Debtors aren't victims. They are two sides of the same engine. The real problem emerges when the engine runs out of fuel. When new borrowing can keep pace with promises already made. That's when the question, who holds the credit, stops being abstract and begins to touch you personally. Because at the summit of this global pyramid, there is no singular face to blame. It isn't China. It isn't Wall Street. It isn't the IMF. It's all of them. And it's us. The modern financial system has turned debt itself into money. Governments issue it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, citizens depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor blurs beyond recognition. Debt used to mean bondage. Today, it means balance. But if that balance ever shifts, if confidence breaks, the illusion ends. And we'll remember what debt really is. A promise that cannot be kept forever.